directly impacting Russia. I'm coming back to the issue of Oscar Jenkins. I know it's a big deal for Australia, and Peter Dutton, Albanese, Penny Wong, everyone's talking about it. Everyone's putting in their 2 cents of opinion. It's a big thing. I don't think the Russians really care about Oscar Jenkins. Don't forget, we've got a huge war with more than 10,000 tanks and armored vehicles destroyed either side. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people dead, right? Oscar Jenkins is dominating headlines in Australia. But the Russians are saying nothing, and I'm beginning to suspect, even though there's that video of him being interrogated, suspect perhaps Oscar Jenkins was not captured by the Russians at all. Perhaps that video was made by Ukrainians who captured him. Because what does Oscar Jenkins say in the video? Oscar Jenkins says, in answer to the question by his interrogators, the question of what are you doing here? Oscar Jenkins says, I'm here to help Ukraine, right? Now, tell me, if you are captured by the Russians and you're being interrogated and they say, what are you doing here? Would you really stand there and tell them to their face, I'm here to help Ukraine? Have you ever seen any prisoner under duress telling Russian soldiers that he's here to help Ukraine? It's either very brave or very silly, or his captors were not Russians. His captors were in fact Ukrainians, right? Maybe Oscar Jenkins was saying that to the Ukrainians who were beating him up, trying to say, guys, I'm here to help you. I'm helping Ukraine. Here I am. And usually when people are captured by the Russians, they try to distance themselves from Ukraine and say, oh, I'm a cook. I'm a medic. I was just here doing evacuations. I'm a journalist. I'm a reporter. I wasn't actually fighting. I got lost. I'm something else, right? So very unusual. But the Russians have not said anything about Oscar Jenkins. There's zero evidence that he was killed, even though everyone's saying he's dead. Guess what? The only people talking about him are the Ukrainians. And the Ukrainians are saying they've got confirmation. They've seen his body. These are the Ukrainians. The Ukrainian sources are saying they've seen his body, that he's dead. The Russians are silent. The Australians are silent. If the Ukrainians have seen his body, we'll provide it, show the evidence. Apparently there's a video flowing around. Glenn Kolomoitz, who is a descendant of Ukrainian Bandera emigres, as I'm informed reliably. He's a former Australian Army officer, and he's a legal consultant who provides legal support to these Ukrainian foreign fighters. He claims that there is a video of Oscar Jenkins' body, which the Ukrainians have. Okay, how does it make any sense? If Oscar Jenkins was captured by the Russians, how does Ukraine end up having his body? No wonder the Russians haven't said anything, because there's a chance, if you look at everything that's being laid out in front of us, all the facts, there's a chance that the Russians never had him. And that's why the Russians are silent. The Russians probably genuinely don't know anything about Oscar Jenkins, because he maybe was never in their custody. And again, I'm convinced that if Oscar Jenkins was in Russian custody, this is the perfect time for the Russians to say, here he is. They'd sit him down in front of a press conference, in front of Russian state media, and they'll get him to say something, and obviously they'll show that he's being looked after, because the Russians need to show that they capture mercenaries, take them in, because it gives good incentive for other mercenaries to surrender. They'll get treated well. They're not going to go and execute him while just a few minutes after they've filmed him, and then the video has gone viral on Russian Telegram channels. Makes no sense at all. So as the Australian newspaper said this morning, there is a plot twist to this story. Something is not right with this story. Something is off. And the fact that DFAT knows nothing, the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, they say they know nothing. But what they have said is that they have no confirmation of Oscar Jenkins' death. They said it's unverified. And DFAT, they have a lot of resources. DFAT have the capabilities of a foreign affairs department of this nation, all the federal agencies at their disposal. DFAT literally are given advice and are briefed by all of Australia's intelligence agencies, the four-letter agencies and so forth. So if DFAT are saying, we don't think he's dead, it's not confirmed, maybe he's not dead. At the same time, it's become a political issue. Liberal and Labor are trying to look tough on this issue and are grandstanding and saying, we have to give Russia a strong message. We're going to strongly respond to Russia. Albanese, Dutton, everyone's jumping in the ring before the federal election to look tough. But guys, it's backfiring. Again, I don't want to interfere or influence the Australian election, but let me just say, read the comment sections on any video, on any article about Oscar Jenkins and about Albanese's and Dutton's tough stance that we will give Russia the strong response. We're going to retaliate against Russia, effectively threatening Russia, right? That Australia will expel the Russian ambassador and so forth. Look at what Australians think. Australians are saying, what's Russia got to do with it? It's not Russia's fault. Russia can't be responsible because some bloke from Melbourne with mental health issues was radicalized by the woke mainstream media. He convinced himself that he needs to fly to Ukraine, join some battalion of Nazis and go and fight the Russians. How is that the Russian ambassador's fault? How is that Russia's fault? You know, I'm sure if the Russians knew that Oscar Jenkins was on a certain section of the front line, the Russians would probably do their ultimate best and utmost best to actually take him alive and keep him alive. There's nothing to gain by killing Oscar Jenkins.
You raised some very good points there. We're just going to go to an ad break, but I'd just like to comment for our viewers is that, investigative journalists here at independent media, including Australian National Review, we know there's a pattern of behaviour, that Russia's pattern of behaviour is to look after prisoners of war, and they're a Christian nation. Ukraine's pattern of behaviour has been to kill their own soldiers. They have retreat brigades that any poor Ukrainian sent to the front line that's trying to retreat, they'll be shot dead by their own military. So the likelihood is that he, quite possibly, as you're saying, has been captured by Ukraine. And certainly that would put his life in danger because the way they treat their own people. But of course, we're only speculating, but as investigators, we always have to look at patterns of behavior. And once again, there is no motive for Russia to, if they stumbled across and captured an Australian fighting against them, to obviously execute him. That would make zero sense. And if Ukraine's saying they have seen his body, well, if Russia had him, Ukraine wouldn't be seeing his body. Let's go to a quick ad break and talk just after this.
The McIntyre Report.
Welcome back, folks. We're here chatting away with Aussie Cossack. Aussie Cossack is still in the Russian consulate in Sydney. He's been locked away going into his third year. He was hoping a prisoner swap deal would be done with Australian Melbourne school teacher Oscar Jenkins. And now there's reports that he may actually be dead. In Russia or Ukraine. No one knows for sure. Aussie, either way, for you, it looks like there's not going to be a prisoner swap with Oscar Jenkins.
Well, all hope is not lost. As I mentioned, DFAT is saying it's unconfirmed. His death is unconfirmed. The Russians aren't saying anything at all. The only people are talking about his death are the Ukrainians. And if the Ukrainians have killed him, well, doesn't that change everything? If Oscar Jenkins was killed by the Ukrainians and his body is with the Ukrainians themselves, I wonder if we'll get an apology from all of those people in Australia, high-profile media personalities and politicians who have denounced Russia for killing Oscar Jenkins. Look, in terms of a prisoner exchange, I was happy to volunteer my candidacy, involve myself, happy to swap places with Oscar Jenkins. He comes to Australia, I go to Russia, no problems. At the moment, I'm in the Russian consulate where I have been. I simply don't trust the Australian police, the Australian establishment to take me into custody. Some people say, oh, you're only facing a breach of parole on a suppression order charge and a very minor assault charge with that altercation with those Ukrainian protesters at Town Hall in Sydney. It's not that. That's not the issue. The issue is once they've got me behind bars, right? Once they've got me, I'm labelled an EHR NSI inmate, which is extreme high risk, national security interest inmate. 0.1% of inmates get this. Only terrorists get this. This is the most serious classification. I'm talking about orange overalls, orange jumpsuit, legs shackled, arms shackled to a belt around my chest, held in the most isolated areas, the worst prisons, so Long Bay Maximum or other places. For what? What is the crime that I have committed? The crimes I'm accused of, these 2 warrants, are extremely minor, very minor charge. And the maximum sentence for breaching a suppression order is 12 months jail. They gave me 10 months. I served 4 months until I was released because I won the appeal on severity. Now, do I trust the Australian government? No. Do I trust the Australian police? No. They still haven't forgiven me for what I did to them during COVID and the lockdowns, making a fool out of them every day with all of those videos going viral and involvement in the pushback. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud that all of us together, yourself included, and all those hundreds of thousands of Australians, in fact, probably millions of Australians, who said no to the lockdowns, who said no to the forced jabs. And we won, guys. We won. We did it. We forced the government to back down. We forced the police to back down. Look at how the police now are suffering from a lack of morale. Look what's happening in Victoria, the Victorian police force. They're going on strike. They're using helicopters to promote their strike police demands, protesting their own government. The police are protesting in Victoria against their own government. Nurse, ambulance staff, paramedics, they all know that it was a scam. They all know that they were involved, like Zonda commandos. You know, Zonda commandos are those people in the concentration camps, the inmates who collaborated with the Germans and were involved in sorting out the possessions and belongings and processing new inmates. And by collaborating with the concentration camp authorities, the Zonda commandos thought they would prolong their lives, right? But ultimately, they're still going to be killed in the concentration camp. The Zonda commando teams lasted 3 to 4 months, and then they kill them and get new ones, right? This is what the police, the doctors, the health workers are and were. They're Zonda commandos. Ultimately, they were harming themselves. They were harming their own parents, their own children, by enforcing the mandates, by enforcing the lockdowns. And they've come to realize it. And that's why during the lockdowns, a lot of police would walk up to me quietly and say, listen, we actually support what you're doing. Keep it up. Keep pushing. Keep doing it. I couldn't believe it. I had cop cars pull up next to me sometimes, and they would look at me, smile, and they'd give a thumbs up or give a salute and just wouldn't pull me over. Right? I got pulled over one time on Burwood Road. Pulls me over and he goes, I'm not filming. My body cam's off. Can you please not film me? I said, all right. He goes, I just pulled you over to shake your hand and said, keep pushing. We're all unvaccinated. We don't want to get it either. We don't want to get the jab. So the police, that's why they're demoralized. That's why so many government workers are demoralized. Look at all these government workers. They're all working from home. They're on insane wages, crazy wages. They're getting $250,000, $300,000 a year because that's what it takes to pay them to keep silent. But there's a morale crisis in Australia. And front and center of it is the Labor and Liberal governments. Again, I don't want to talk about the election. I don't want to go down that path because I'm sort of censored myself for a good reason, and I respect the Russian government's wishes. There's no problems with that. I understand because I don't want the Russians to be accused in Australia of harboring me for the purposes of influencing the federal election. But again, hypothetically, if Russia was to influence the 2025 Australian federal election, why would they? What can you possibly get out of it? We all know that it's going to be either Albanese or Peter Dutton. There is no third option. It's impossible, statistically impossible. So what's the choice here? What is someone really going to make the allegation that I'm supporting Albo over Dutton or Dutton over Albo? Well, if that's the way they want to play that card, people like Senator Junium, the Liberal senators, I'll be honest with you, not many Labor spokespeople have attacked me. In fact, probably none. All of the attacks have come from the Good Party onto me. So yeah. Senator Simon Birmingham, he's attacked me. He's accused me of foreign interference. Senator James Patterson, he's a grub, can't stand him. Again, accused me of foreign interference. So it's the Liberal Party, and the people like Mike Paluzzo from Canberra. These are the ones who are against dissent. So if you ask me the question, Albo or Dutton, without interfering in the election, I would say vote for Albo. Do not vote for Dutton. Dutton is a former police officer. Dutton's a megalomaniac. Albo is just a dope, right? I'd rather have a dope in Kirribilli House than a narcissist like Dutton, wouldn't you say, Jamie?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think it just highlights, one, it's true that why would Russia care either of them? Because the position of the government doesn't change their attitude towards Russia. They'll continue to demonize Russia and continue to send weapons to Ukraine to attack Russia. So both parties have no different views there. So there's no different point of view for Russia to support. But it's true, yes. I mean, Dutton and Albo, it goes to show how weak Australian political leadership is to have zero choice. And, I won't mention a certain Middle Eastern nation that has their handlers all over Dutton. who are becoming more and more anti-Russian, saying the Liberals even appear to be more anti-Russian than even the Labor Party. So either way, I mean, it's disappointing. And I'm Australian. Will I even bother to vote? I won't vote for Dutton or Albo. And we just have a sheer lack of choice until we're going to have a third party like a Nigel Farage is, trying to do in England, where he could become the next PM. Australia really is the weakling when it comes to political activism, despite us independent journalists doing our best. So let's move on.